My son called me a dictator because I controlled the money. He wanted $5,000 tonight, not caring I'd already given him $3,000. Then he laughed about inheriting my auto shops worth millions once I was gone. Days later, he drove me into Alaska and left me to die. He believed he'd finally won, but he never saw the moment I turned everything against him. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my living room, the soft glow of the lamp washing over Sarah's photograph on the mantel. Her smile, frozen in time, lit up the room in a way no lamp ever could. It had been years since she passed, but tonight her presence felt heavier than usual. Maybe because I finally understood the full price of my sacrifices. Maybe because I finally saw how deep the betrayal cut. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until it feels alive. This was the same house I had poured everything into. A home worth $600,000, built with sweat and care, filled with memories, and now under threat from the very son I had given everything to. I leaned back in my chair and let my mind wander to the numbers, because the numbers told the story better than words ever could. $45,000 every single year for tuition at the University of Washington. 4 years, nearly $200,000 gone into education I thought would shape Ethan into a man his mother could be proud of. I remembered signing each check, the way Sarah's voice echoed in my head. He deserves the best, William. And I agreed every time, no matter how heavy it felt. Then came the car. He wanted a Honda Civic, brand new, nothing used, nothing second-hand. $20,000 in cash handed over like it was pocket change, because I wanted to see him smile. I wanted him to feel celebrated on his graduation day. I can still see him behind the wheel, grinning, revving the engine like freedom had finally arrived. I thought that smile meant gratitude. Now I know it only meant expectation. And it didn't stop there. For years, I sent $3,000, sometimes $3,500, every month. Allowances that I told myself were investments in his future. But month after month, year after year, it became less of a gift and more of a leash I had tied to myself. He lived on that money, breathed it, counted on it the way most people count on air. I thought I was providing stability. Instead, I was building dependence. I looked up at Sarah's picture, her kind eyes staring back at me. My throat tightened. "Sarah, do you see this?" I whispered. "I gave him everything, and this is the price I pay." My voice cracked on the last word because saying it out loud made the truth unbearable. The numbers weren't just money. They were pieces of my life. They were late nights at the auto shop, grease under my nails, sore muscles, missed dinners, missed birthdays, because I was out there earning every single dollar. And now the same dollars were being used as a weapon against me. Ethan didn't see sacrifice. He saw control. He didn't see love. He saw chains. And he wanted it all. Not just the monthly allowances, not just a little more breathing room. No, he wanted the empire I had built from nothing. My auto shops, worth $2.5 million, stand tall in this city as monuments to decades of labor. He wanted the house. He wanted the savings. He wanted the land. To him, my death wasn't a tragedy waiting in the shadows. It was a payday. The weight of that realization sat heavily in my chest. My own son, the boy I had held at Sarah's funeral, the boy who once clutched my hand because his mother's absence was too much to bear, now looked me in the eye and said, "When you die, I'll finally run your business." That sentence was carved deeper than any knife could. It echoed in my mind, bouncing against the walls of this old house until it became unbearable. I stared around the living room, letting the familiar details wash over me. The wooden floors I had sanded and stained with my own hands. The oak dining table where Sarah, Ethan, and I once gathered every Sunday, passing plates of roast chicken, laughing at nothing and everything. Now the table sat empty, its wood polished but cold, its chairs silent. The laughter was gone, and all that remained was the sound of my own breathing. I remembered Ethan as a child, clutching a baseball bat too big for his small hands, swinging wildly at pitches during his Little League games. Sarah would cheer, her voice high and bright, while I stood at the fence, my heart swelling with pride. I remembered him falling asleep in the back seat, his head leaning against the window, Sarah gently brushing his hair from his forehead. Those were the moments I thought I was building something worth living for. But somewhere along the way, the boy I raised disappeared. Slowly, gradually, he turned into someone else. Someone who spent nights hunched over video games instead of chasing dreams. Someone who refused to work, who laughed at the idea of a steady job, who spat back the words, "Why should I work when you control everything?" Those words still rang in my ears like a verdict that declared me guilty of smothering him, guilty of chaining him down, guilty of turning love into domination. And maybe he was right in a way. I had been confused about providing parenting. I had mistaken money for love, checks for connection, allowances for fatherhood. But even if I had failed, even if I had created this dependence, it didn't excuse the cold calculation I saw in his eyes. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't just lost. He was planning for my death. I felt a surge of anger, hotter than anything I'd felt in years. It rose from my stomach, burned through my chest, and left me shaking. Anger at Ethan for his betrayal. Anger at myself for feeding this monster with my own hands. Anger at Sarah for leaving me alone with this impossible task. I whispered again to her photo, but this time my voice carried more steel. I couldn't save him from himself, Sarah, but I can save what's left of us. I pulled the old photo albums from the shelf, letting the dust rise as I cracked them open. Page after page told the story of sacrifice. Ethan is in his baseball uniform. Ethan at his graduation. Ethan with the Honda Civic gleaming in the background. And always, Sarah's face was somewhere near, her arms wrapped around him, her smile lighting everything up. These photos weren't just memories. They were exhibits in the trial of my heart, proof that I had given everything I could. The living room became a courtroom of ghosts. The fireplace, the old armchair, the wedding photo above the mantel, they were all witnesses, silently watching me weigh love against betrayal. And the verdict was clear. Ethan had chosen greed over blood, entitlement over gratitude. I closed the album, my hands trembling. My eyes drifted to the desk in the corner, where papers lay stacked in neat piles. Legal documents, contracts, drafts of my will. I had written them in moments of doubt, moments when Ethan's words cut too deep, and now they glowed in the dim light, like weapons waiting to be used. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. For the first time in years, I felt clarity. I couldn't buy Ethan's love back. I couldn't rewind the clock and undo the mistakes. But I could protect what was left. I could ensure that Sarah's memory, our home, our business, wouldn't be twisted into rewards for betrayal. I could make sure that everything I built wouldn't die the same death as my trust. I leaned forward, pressing my hands flat against the desk, breathing deeply. The fear was still there, but beneath it lived something stronger. Resolve, determination. A steel that had been dormant since my Navy days, but had never truly left me. I picked up one of the papers, a draft of the will I had begun revising. My eyes traced the lines that redirected everything, my shops, my savings, even the house, away from Ethan and toward charities, scholarships, veterans, people who would value them instead of wasting them. My hands shook as I held the document, but my heart felt steady for the first time in months. I whispered again, this time almost as a vow. Sarah, I won't let him destroy what we built. I won't let him kill your memory. The lamp flickered, shadows dancing on the walls. I could almost hear her voice, soft and firm, telling me to stand tall. I set the papers down carefully, aligning them as if preparing for battle. Because that's what this was now, a battle for my legacy, a battle for my dignity. The betrayal had broken me, but it had also woken me up. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man reclaiming control of his life, And as the rain tapped against the windows, as the night deepened around me, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When Ethan came with his plans, his schemes, his manipulations, he wouldn't find the broken man he expected. He would find me ready. And that thought carried me into silence, where anger turned into resolve, and resolve became the seed of a plan. A plan that would begin the moment Ethan lured me into Alaska. A plan that would end not with my death, but with his downfall. I did not wake rested after the night I spent with the lamp on and Sarah's picture watching me. Morning came thin and gray over the windows, and the phone lit up on the counter before I could pour coffee. My son's name glowed. I let it ring twice so my hands would stop shaking. When I picked up, his voice sounded bright, careful, almost rehearsed. "Just you and me, Dad. Denali. A clean slate." He talked about clean air, about father and son time, about how the city noise had gotten into his bones. He promised fresh air and honest talk. He used words like reconnect and trust. He did not mention cash. He did not mention the shops or the house. He did not apologize for the sentence that had cut me open a week earlier. He dangled the kind of hope that used to move me. I did not answer right away. I stood with the phone warm against my ear and stared at Sarah's smile in the frame. There was fear in me. There was anger. But there was also a hard, straight line under both, like the horizon on a cold day. I wanted to see the truth of my son without fog, without excuses. The only way to do that was to stand where the excuses could not hide. "All right," I said. My voice was steady. He sounded relieved, deeply relieved, and that relief felt wrong in a way I could not yet name. When the call ended, I phoned Michael Turner. Michael has been my lawyer long enough to know how I make decisions, slow and stubborn, then fast once I set my jaw. I told him about the demand for $5,000, about the word dictator, and about the promise that when I died, he would run everything. I told him about the sudden trip and the talk of trust. Michael did not tell me to stay home. He asked questions. "Is your most recent will ready to file?" "Yes, in draft and execution copy." "Are your beneficiary designations current?" "Yes." "Do you want to move the operating account for the shops into a temporary trust if you go out of contact?" I said yes. He said he would prepare a filing packet, hold it until I texted a single word we agreed on, and then lodge it with the court that day. As he talked logistics, I pictured the ledger of my life. The 2 auto shops worth $2.5 million, the house Sarah loved appraised at $600,000, the savings I had built one invoice at a time. He believed those numbers were his. I drove to the bank after breakfast. The manager met me in his glass office and closed the door against the sound of coins and printers. He produced a stack of forms with yellow flags and a pen that left a clean, dark line. I asked him to flag every withdrawal above $2,000 without my voice phrase. I asked him to note that no instructions from my son should be honored, even if he sounded like me, even if he cried, even if he used the word emergency. He did not ask for reasons. He slid the forms across the desk, watched me initial, and keyed a notation that would make the computer stubborn on my behalf. Back at the house, I packed slowly. I did not forget the simple things. Wool socks, long underwear, an old flannel with elbows worn smooth, a hat that had seen real winters. I set the folder beneath the shirts so curious eyes would find only cloth. I walked through each room and touched the wood I had sanded with my own hands. I ran a cloth over Sarah's chair. I stood at the mantel and spoke in a voice only the picture could hear. "I am going," I said. "I am not walking blind. I will not let him erase what we built." He was waiting at the airport with a grin that showed too many teeth. He wore a new hiking jacket with the tags cut clean as if with a hotel razor. He hugged me quickly, one-armed, and patted my back like a man satisfied with a deal. "You look good, Dad," he said. "This will be great for us." While we stood in line, he talked fast, little stories about videos where people sleep in the snow to heal their minds, about discipline and ice water, and how the wild makes men honest. He said the wilderness teaches character. He did not say it teaches consequences. On the plan, he asked survival questions the way a student crams the night before an exam. How far can a man walk in snow without water? How do you read the sky before a storm? How do you tell a moose track from a bear's hindfoot? I answered in short, clean sentences that have kept men alive. Follow water downhill. Make noise in the brush so you do not surprise a mother. Smoke carries. Cold kills the careless first. He wrote notes on a napkin with a borrowed pen. He watched my mouth more than my eyes. He smiled when I spoke about signals, about how a small flame becomes a message when placed in the open. Anchorage met us with dry air and a smell like iron. We picked up a heavy truck with chains in the bed and an owner's manual still in its plastic sleeve. Ethan drove, hands at 10 and 2, like a picture in a handbook. He checked his phone even when there was no reason. He told me he had already booked us a room at a lodge near the park. He said we could talk by the fire and plan our route. When I asked which ranger had signed off on his plan, he said, "A guy at the desk." When I asked his name, he shrugged and turned up the heater. We stopped at a general store with a faded sign and a porch that had seen boots in every winter of the last 50 years. He told me to grab protein bars and coffee. I walked slowly along the aisle. I listened. I heard his voice first as a murmur, then as a whisper sharpened by intent. "He'll never know," he said. "After this, everything is mine." The sentence did not echo. It stuck in the air like a nail driven into old wood. He said he had the route. He said he had the timing. He said there would be no signal. He said he would be back before anyone asked questions. He said it softly, but he said it like a man reading a script. I did not stop moving. I kept my eyes on a shelf of canned beans and grabbed 2 at random. I walked to the counter. I put down the bars and the beans and a box of matches I did not need, and I paid in cash. When he came up behind me, he asked if I had found the peanut kind I liked. His voice was smooth again. He was patient with the clerk. He thanked her for the change as if he were in a commercial. In the truck, he said the weather would be perfect. "Perfect for what?" I asked. He smiled at the road. "Stories," he said. We reached the lodge before dark. The lobby smelled like cedar and coffee. A woman at the desk had hands with old scars that told stories. Ethan did the talking. He asked for our keys. He asked about the backcountry permit. He asked for a printed map and then ignored the parts of it that were marked in red pencil. The woman tapped the circles and said, "Grizzlies here. A cow moose charged a tourist last week here. Keep your distance. If your gut says, turn back, turn back." She looked at me, not at him. I nodded. I asked her to circle our names on the register and write down the route we were discussing. She did, pen crisp against paper. Over coffee at a small round table, we reviewed his route. It pushed deeper than a first day should. It crossed 2 streams that would be swollen by the melt. It followed a river corridor with fresh bear sign. He traced it with a finger as if he were drawing a wish into the surface. I suggested a shorter loop. He said he preferred the other plan because it promised quiet. He said quietly, like a man picking a lock. In the room, he unpacked brand new gear, the kind that looks good in photos and fails in weather. I watched him lay out a flashlight, still wearing a barcode sticker. He held up a steel mug and pretended to sip. I arranged my pack by habit, socks on top, knife in the outside pocket, matches in a dry bag. I tucked the folder beneath folded shirts. I texted Michael the lodge name, the room number, the plate on our truck, and the route Ethan loved. Michael replied with 2 words. "Be ready." I slept lightly and woke early. The dining room had small windows that turned the morning into thin squares of gold. Ethan bounced in his chair like a boy on the first day of summer. He ate fast. He talked faster. "We will camp by the river," he said. "We will make a fire. We will do coffee like the old days." He spoke about us in a way that moved me and scared me. When we went to the truck, I lifted each pack. His felt lighter than mine by a lot. He had the food, he had the beacon, he had the stove, he had the rifle in a hard case. The balance did not feel like an accident. We passed a ranger station with a flag cracking in the wind and a deck swept clear of snow. He said there was no need to stop because everything was in order. I watched it in the mirror until the road turned, and it disappeared. The road became a narrower thread. The trees pressed closer. The sky leaned down. We parked where the tire ruts ended. The world sounded like wind in branches and the steady speech of a river. We shouldered our packs and began to walk. Snow hung on the north sides of things. Mud woke under the sun. We crossed a shallow channel on rocks as flat as old plates. Moose tracks the size of dinner plates followed the bank. I showed him how the dewclaws dig when the ground is soft. He said, "Wow." He took a photo he would never post. We found a dry pocket just above the river and set camp. I taught him to hang food high and away from our sleeping spot. I showed him how to stack kindling under wood so one match would do the work. He listened with his head and not with his eyes. He asked how far a man can be heard yelling in the trees if a bear is close. He asked how long it takes for a rescue to reach you. I told him the truth. Hours if you are lucky. A day if you are not. Longer if the weather turns. He nodded like he had written those answers weeks ago. When the fire steadied, we held our hands over it and let our fingers thaw. He asked about Sarah. He wanted to hear how we met, how she teased me into dancing, how she told me to stop being stubborn and live a little. I told him she loved to laugh with her whole face. I told him she could make a grocery list sound like a poem. I told him she held him in the hospital and said, "You are a father now, and we will learn together." He looked into the flames and said he wished he remembered more. The wish sounded true and false at the same time, like a coin held up to the light. We sat in the good quiet a while. It did not last. He asked me how I know when someone is lying. He kept his tone light, but his shoulders gave him away. They held too still. I told him about cadence. I told him about stillness. I told him about the way liars rehearse and then forget to breathe. He said that was interesting. He poked the fire with a stick that was too soft and watched it crumble. The night dropped on us fast. Stars came out like nails driven into a dark roof. The river's voice grew louder as the air thinned. He stood and stretched and said he was not tired. He said he would take first watch. He said I should get some sleep, that I had earned it. The word earned hung like a hook. "All right," I said. I went to my tent and crawled inside and left the flap unzipped 2 inches. I did not sleep. I lay still and let my hearing do what it was trained to do. I heard him move around the fire. I heard the truck creak a little when weight shifted on the tailgate. I heard a zipper's teeth whisper and then close. I heard the soft clunk of a hard case. I counted to 60 and then again. I slid my hand to the pocket knife and made sure it was where I needed it to be. I slipped the strap of my pack around my wrist as if I were tying myself to the part of my life that still felt mine. I went out of the tent once like a man who needed to step behind a tree. He startled, then smiled, then acted as if he had been doing nothing. He said the stars were something. He said he could watch them all night. He said I should get back in and rest. His hands did not shake. His eyes were flat and bright, like a surface that does not show what is below. I returned to the tent and lay down and let the plan he thought he had settle next to me like cold air. I reviewed my plan, the small one that fit in a man's pocket. Michael had the filing queue ready. The bank had locks. The lodge had our names on a map. The route was texted. If I lived through whatever was coming, those small things would grow teeth. If I did not, those small things would still matter. They would speak for me when I could not. That thought steadied me more than warmth could. Near dawn, the world turned gray at the edges. He poured water into a pot and let it hiss into coffee. He spoke through the tent wall. "Coffee, Dad?" I sat up. I tightened my laces. I took one breath and then another. I stepped out into the cold and took the tin cup he offered. He clinked his against mine and said, "To us." The words sounded like a toast at a party I did not attend. We broke camp slowly and fast at the same time. I folded the tent neatly. He packed the truck in a rhythm that looked practiced for a first trip. He told me he would swing the truck around to the bend so we could load the last of it more easily. He said it like a favor. He started the engine. He turned the wheel. He eased away. His smile was the last thing to leave, and it left like a light switched off. The river kept talking. The trees kept listening. I stood with my hands at my sides and did not run. I did not shout. I did not plead. I let the quiet come in full, honest weight. I tasted it, I measured it, and then I stepped into it, not as a victim, not as a fool, but as a man who had learned again what he already knew. I would not die in the quiet he had chosen for me. I would not let greed write the last line. He thought I was a soft place to land. He thought I would break easily. He thought after this, everything would be his. He was wrong. I knew the river would lead me. I knew the sun would swing the way it always does. I knew that if I kept moving, the plan I had made with pen and paper back in my warm house would meet the plan he had made in secrecy. One of those plans cared nothing for human wishes. The other one did. I tightened the strap of my pack. I looked once at the place where the fire had been, a small circle of ash pressed into dirt. I looked at the tree where our food line still hung like a thin question. I looked at the tracks we had made and the single set of tire marks that were already growing faint. I whispered to Sarah because I could. "They think I lost," I said, "but the game is only beginning." Before I took the first step, I checked the pocket where I kept copies of my will and the draft trust. The pages felt like thin armor. Michael had my itinerary, the truck plate, the route, and the phrase to bring the state police to the lodge if I failed to check in. The bank had voice locks. The clerk had circled our names on a map. He believed silence would erase me. He did not know I had left a trail of alarms that could sing. Then I began to walk, sure, toward water and distance, and the next chapter where truth would show its face. I woke to a silence that did not belong to any morning I knew. The fire ring was a gray plate, my breath a small cloud. From the truck came the sound of a latch, then a case closing with a quiet thud. I unzipped the tent, stepped into the cold light, and saw Ethan at the tailgate with the GPS, the food box, and the rifle already loaded. His face was still. Not sorry, not conflicted. Still like ice. He did not circle the moment with stories. He lifted his chin a fraction and looked through me. "Go meet the Grizzlies, Dad." The words were carried away by the river, but their weight stayed. He reached under the seat and pulled out my old expense notebook, the small ledger I had kept for 20 years. Grease along the spine. Coffee stains on the margin where Sarah once rested a mug while we balanced bills. He pinched it between two fingers like trash. "This is not love," he said. "This is control." Every dollar was a chain. He dropped the book into the mud and ground his heel until paper and water turned to paste. Then he climbed in, closed the door, and drove away as if backing out of a driveway. The engine dissolved into the trees. Snow sifted from a branch and landed where the truck had been. I stood there with my hands useless at my sides and the ledger bleeding into the ground. I picked it up. The cover tore at the corner where I had written Sarah's name next to a hospital charge. Her name blurred. I said it anyway once, like a prayer and a promise. The grief moved through me and left my legs. When it passed, I folded the ruined book and put it inside my jacket, against my chest, where warmth could argue with the river. He wanted it turned into a weapon. I would turn it into a witness. I took stock. Layers against wind, a pocket knife, a few bars, no map, no beacon, no gun, no truck. A sky that might break open if I kept moving. Water is a road, so I followed the river. The bank held tracks like a ledger of the night. Moose prints punched deep. Fox stitched light along the edge. Once round depressions that made me loud on purpose, because surprise is a poor way to meet a bear. I spoke aloud to keep the rhythm. I counted my steps when the ground tilted. I broke small twigs as I went. I marked trees with a scuff of bark. I kept my eyes on the far bend and then the next. Time became a narrow thing. My mouth went dry, then steady when I found a clean lip of currant and drank from my cupped hands. I kept anger as fuel, not as fire. Anger burns a man and leaves him cold. Discipline keeps him moving. I thought of Sarah's laugh, of grease under my nails, of the sentence my son had said, as if ordering coffee. I set each thought down and picked up the next foot of ground. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. Engines found me first, not a car, not a truck. 4 machines, small and sure, fanning and pausing. I stopped and listened for their pattern, then cupped my hands and gave one clear call. Here. The engines cut at once. Brush moved. A man stepped into the clearing with a helmet in his hand and eyes that knew winter. 2 women and another man stood behind him with the same easy steadiness. "Oliver Reed," he said. "Former Ranger." He looked at my boots, my jacket, my face. He saw enough. I told him the truth in clean lines. My son had taken the truck, the food, the rifle, and the beacon. He had told me to meet the grizzlies. Oliver's jaw set. The younger woman hissed air through her teeth. The older woman gave me a bottle and told me to drink in small sips. "That is attempted murder," Oliver said. Not dramatic. Recorded like a ranger at a desk. He asked how long since the truck left. I told him. He looked at the sunline and the shadows and did the math. "He will not expect you back before dark," he said. "There is a service trail. We can reach the park road fast. You can be at the lodge before he arrives. Do you want that?" "Yes," I said. The word tasted like metal and relief. He handed me a helmet. We moved. He threaded the machines through willow and alder, over shallow crossings where ice barked under the tires, up a slope that felt like a wall until we were on top of it, and the lodge roofs showed like shoulders above the trees. We rolled to the back lot. He killed the engine, and the quiet felt earned. "What now?" he asked. I told him I wanted him as a witness. I told him I wanted to sit in my room when my son opened the door and believed he had erased me. I told him I had a lawyer ready to file a will that left Ethan nothing, a trust that sent my shops, my house, and my savings to a veterans' tool fund, a wildlife trust, and a scholarship in Sarah's name. I told him I had a text trail, a map with our route circled, and a small ledger with a heel print that said everything no speech could say. Oliver listened and nodded once. He arranged a room next to mine with a narrow connecting door. The clerk, hands scarred by winters, did not ask any questions that mattered. Oliver placed a small camera so that it could see the door and the table. He set a recorder on the dresser. He checked the lights and handed me his card. "If he threatens, call," he said. "If he lies, sit still and let the tape do the lifting." I phoned Michael Turner and told him, not as a story, but as a report. He kept his voice level. He asked for scans of the signed will and the trust draft. I sent them through the Lodge app, 1 page at a time, slow enough to be clear. He read while I held the line. "Everything is enforceable," he said. "If you text me the Word file, I will lodge both at 8 in the morning. I told him I wanted Ethan's. He told me to drink water and keep the door locked until I chose to unlock it. "Loud men break faster than quiet ones," he said. "Let the paper do some of the talking." I laid out the table with the care I use for a carburetor. The will, the trust draft names the Harper Scholarship, the Veterans Tool Fund, and the Alaska Wildlife Trust. A short letter to each charity, signed and dated. I kept the small photo of Sarah in my wallet, the ledger, cover broken, heel print dried like a fossil. I put the ledger in the center. If he reached for anything, it would be that. Twilight slid over the lot like a lid. Trucks came and went. Voices moved across the porch. The cold sharpened the air to glass. Then I heard my rental truck idling high, the way it did when the temperature dropped. Gravel pressed under tires. A key scraped at my lock, missed, scraped again, and found it. The door opened, and Ethan stepped in on a breath he did not finish. He scanned the bed, the window, the table. He saw the ledger. He saw the papers. He saw Sarah. His eyes landed on me. For a second, there was a boy in them. Then the man had decided to be returned. He made a rough sound that was supposed to be a laugh and sounded like a cough. He looked at the small camera on the dresser and tried to ignore it with his body. He said he went for help. He said he had been looking for a ranger when I walked in. His voice climbed half a note at the end of the sentence and hung there, a flag on a still day. I let the silence show the seam. He tried again. He said the ledger fell in the mud on its own. He said the ground was wet. He said he had panicked because the wilderness had spooked him. I spoke in a voice I had found again in the trees. "You told me to meet the grizzlies," I said. "You took the food, the rifle, the beacon, and the truck. You said on the phone that after this, everything would be yours." I turned the ledger so the heel print faced him. "You called this a chain. It was love? Clumsy sometimes, yes? But love?" He did not sit. He paced 2 steps and back. He pointed at the ledger as if it had insulted him. He said I had kept him small with monthly money. He said I had never trusted him to breathe on his own. He touched Sarah's photo with a finger that did not deserve to be near it and claimed she would have wanted him to run the shops. He tried to wrap himself in her memory like a coat. I set my palm on her picture and left it there. She wanted a son who earned trust, I said. She wanted the truth. She would have wanted you to hear what happens next. I slid the will toward him until it stopped against the edge of the table. He read the top line. I watched the meaning move across his face in a slow wave. The color drained, returned, then thinned again. "You cannot cut me out," he said. The sentence broke in his mouth. "I am your son." The word son did not sound right coming from his throat. He glanced at the connecting door, finally sensing the shape of another presence. He peered at the camera again and adjusted his face, as if a pose could replace a fact. "You could have worked," I said. "You could have opened the shop, taken the keys, learned the books, and met the customers who kept our name alive. You did not want the days with me in them. You wanted the day after I die." I said it quietly. The camera did not need volume. It needed truth. He hit the table with his palm. The will jumped. The ledger slipped a 1/4 inch and settled. He lowered his voice because the camera had taught him something. He called me cruel. He called me selfish. He said each dollar I gave him was a bruise, that the ledger was proof. He sounded like a man trying to talk past his own footprints. Oliver opened the connecting door and stood square in it. He said his name and his past in one breath and then gave Ethan 2 choices in words without glitter. Sit and wait for the troopers or walk out and be found later with more paper behind the case. Ethan tried a smile that belonged in college, not in a room with a ruined ledger and a camera light. He said this was private family business. Oliver nodded once. "Abandoning a man in grizzly country without food, a firearm, or a beacon is not private," he said. "It is a crime." I read the first clause of the will out loud so the tape would carry the names. "I leave my auto shops, my house, and my savings to the Harper Scholarship, the Veterans Tool Fund, and the Alaska Wildlife Trust in honor of my wife, Sarah." Saying her name in that room drew a straight line through the noise. Ethan stared at the paper as if letters could be pushed back into their bottle. He asked if there was anything he could say to change my mind. I thought of the truck pulling away. I thought of his boot on the ledger. I thought of the sentence he had chosen that morning. "You could have said I'm sorry before you drove," I said. "You could have said I was wrong before your heel came down. You could have said I will work and then shown it. You did not." He sagged into the chair across from me like a man who had misread a map and finally saw the river on the wrong side. He tried one more time to turn the blame like a wrench. He said I had pushed him. He said money had poisoned us. He said control had made him desperate. I let the words go by like cold wind. We were past debate. We were at a record. Oliver stayed in the doorway, present without heat. The clerk tapped once on the hall door and passed me a note with the time. The troopers were on their way. 20 minutes. I set the note down beside the will. Ethan watched my fingers and then his own, as if the right gesture could make time reverse. I called Michael and said one word. File. He said he would at 8 on the dot. He reminded me to breathe. He reminded me to drink water. He told me the next part would be forms and quiet, and then sound again. I thanked him and put the phone face down so its black screen would not pull any eyes. For a long minute, none of us spoke. I looked at the ledger and saw the arc of a heel pressed into dried mud. It looked like a fossil of a choice. I opened it to a page with a neat line. Tuition, $45,000. Ethan smiling, Sarah crying. I closed it and left it in the center where it belonged. He did not reach for it. He could not. He whispered that he had not truly meant harm. He whispered that he thought I would find my way out. He whispered that I was stronger than most men his age. He wanted those whispers to be a bridge. They were only air. Behind them sat a packed truck, a full food box, a rifle, and a beacon that should have been mine. Facts have weight. Whispers do not. Outside, a vehicle rolled in and doors shut with the soft discipline of men who do this for a living. I stood. My knees spoke in the language of 65 years. My back told the truth about engines lifted and transmissions carried. Under everything was a strange calm, the kind that shows up only when a plan built in a kitchen meets a plan cooked in the dark and does not break. I looked at Ethan and saw him in 2 frames at once. A boy in a cap, squinting at a baseball he had finally hit. A man by a truck, heel on paper, calling love a chain. Both belonged to me. One no longer did. I placed my palm on Sarah's picture and felt wood under paper, under skin. They thought I was weak, I said in my head, and then out loud so the camera could take it. They were wrong. Oliver checked the camera light and nodded. He stepped back into his room so the hall would be clear. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and left the photo on top, her eyes steady as ever. Ethan wiped his face with both hands, not to dry tears, but to rearrange lines. He looked at the door as if it could open into a summer he had already spent. I opened the door. The hallway smelled like coffee and old pine. Boots sounded on boards. A clerk glanced up from her ledger and then away, giving us privacy in the way only people who live with winter know how to give it. I stood to the side so the next part could enter without pushing. This is how justice felt to me. Not hot, not triumphant, not even loud. Cool and exact, like the click of a fine ratchet catching the right tooth. The accounts were locked. The filings were ready. The witnesses were in place. The boy who believed inheritance was a right had met a father who finally remembered that love without boundaries is not love at all. Before the hallway filled, I gave the number shape so he would understand what had just moved beyond his reach. The 2 auto shops appraised last fall at $2.5 million. The house, $600,000 on the roll, with cabinets Sarah sanded. The savings in CDs, $380,000. The operating account with a hard stop on any withdrawal without my voice phrase, no exceptions. A note on the life insurance policy naming the trust, not him. The numbers sat between us. He stared at the clause that barred him from serving as executor, a line that closed a door he assumed was his. I told him the charities would publish annual reports. Sarah's name would live on a plaque above a scholarship desk. He flinched at the first number, blinked at the second, and went pale at the sentence about the policy. He tried a defense, pitiful now. He said he had only asked for $5,000. He said it was never about millions. He said $5,000 would have bought him time. I reminded him that $5,000 was only the match. The millions were the fire he had planned to build from it. His shoulders told me he finally believed me. The plan was ash. If you have ever been dismissed by someone you love, if you have ever been told your worth is measured in dollars and obedience, I know that ache. If you believe every person deserves to be seen and respected, type the word justice in the comments. Say it for yourself. Say it for the people who never got to. Now watch what we do to change it. I sat in that motel room long after the police cruiser's taillights disappeared. The night outside was quiet, but inside, my heart was still hammering like a man who had just run 10 miles. The folder of documents lay open on the table, each page now carrying a weight beyond ink. My son had tried to take my life, and instead, those pages had given me mine back. For the first time in years, I felt in control, and I wasn't about to let that go. The papers Michael Turner and I prepared were more than just legal documents. They were my line in the sand. 2 auto shops I built with my own hands, appraised at $2.5 million, were no longer waiting for Ethan's grasping fingers. They now belonged to a trust that bore Sarah's name, a scholarship fund to give young men and women a chance to rise without having to sell their souls. My house in Seattle, $600,000 of timber, brick, and memory, was marked for liquidation to support the same cause. My savings accounts, just under $400,000, were bound for veterans and wildlife, the communities that had shaped me when I needed direction. Ethan inherited nothing, not a dollar, not a chair, not even a photograph. When I signed those papers, my hand didn't tremble. My pulse was steady. I thought of Sarah's smile, of the nights she worked late with me in the shop when we couldn't afford extra hands. I thought of her saying, "We're not building this just for us, Will. We're building it so someone else's child might have a shot." Tonight she got her wish. Oliver sat across from me, his camera still resting on the chair. He had captured it all: the confrontation, the shouting, Ethan's denial, the moment he stepped from anger into panic. When the police led him out in cuffs, his voice cracked like a boy's, not a man's. He begged. He cursed. He promised it was all a misunderstanding. But the camera didn't lie. My ledger didn't lie. The bruises on my arms from the Alaskan forest didn't lie. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the edge of the bed. My throat was dry, but the water went down like medicine. For so long I had lived in fear of dying and leaving Sarah's memory twisted in the hands of a son who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to money. Tonight, that fear was gone, replaced by something quieter, something heavier, a kind of relief that doesn't come with celebration, but with finality. The next morning, Michael called. "It's all in motion," he said. "The trust is lodged. The will is filed. Anchorage PD has your full statement, and the DA is preparing charges. William, you don't have to worry anymore." I leaned back against the wall of the motel, listening to the hum of trucks on the highway. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a weight leave my shoulders. "Michael," I told him, "I'm not worried, not anymore." Still, I had to face what came next, because after the storm, there is always silence, and silence can be the loudest thing in the world. I flew back to Seattle 2 days later. Oliver shook my hand before I boarded. "You've got a good fight in you," he said. "Not everyone comes out of the woods like you did." I smiled and told him I owed him more than I could ever repay. He waved me off. "Just live for something worth living for," he said. His words stuck with me the whole flight home. When I walked into my house, it felt different. The air was the same. The light from the bay window fell across the oak floor just as it always had. But the silence was deeper. It wasn't the silence of loss anymore. It was the silence of closure. I ran my hand across the wooden banister, remembering the nights I carried Ethan up those stairs after he'd fallen asleep in the car. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I had shed enough tears. Now it was time to move forward. Within a week, the locks were changed. The security cameras were up. Luis at the shop called daily to update me on operations. "We're holding strong," he said. "Customers ask about you. They say they'll stick by Harper Auto no matter what." That gave me peace, because Harper Auto wasn't mine anymore. It was Sarah's. It was every student who would one day hold a Harper scholarship letter in their hands and realize someone believed in them. I sold the house within 2 months, $600,000, the appraisal almost to the penny. Watching strangers walk through, pointing at the crown molding, the wide kitchen island, the fireplace where Sarah's photo used to rest, it hurt, yes. But it also freed me. This house had been a battlefield of memories. It was time to let it go. I signed the deed at the title office, stepped outside, and took a deep breath. "I finally let you go, Sarah," I whispered. "But I carry you with me." I moved into a 2-bedroom condo overlooking a park. Nothing grand. $200,000 paid in cash from the sale. The first night I slept there, I left the windows open. I listened to children laughing in the park, the sound of a dog barking, and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. It wasn't the silence of grief. It was the sound of life moving forward. Ethan, meanwhile, sat in county jail awaiting trial. The Anchorage DA stacked charges against him: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. The words looked harsh on paper, but they were softer than what he had done to my heart. I read the articles in the paper. Seattle businessman's son charged with attempted parricide. I closed the paper after that line, not because it hurt, but because I refused to give it more of my time. Friends asked if I would visit him. I said no. He had made his choice. I had made mine. The phone rang once, collect from the Anchorage jail. I let it ring until the line went dead. Later, Michael told me Ethan was asking for a second chance, for forgiveness. I shook my head. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving him a key to the same door he tried to burn down, I said. One evening I sat in my new living room with a cup of tea, watching the sun sink behind the park. The windows glowed orange, and for a moment I felt Sarah's hand on my shoulder. My voice broke, but softly this time. I don't need them anymore, Sarah. I have myself. I have you. That's enough. That night I slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Weeks turned into months. The trust began awarding scholarships. I received the first thank you letter from a young woman named Emily, a freshman in mechanical engineering at the University of Washington. She wrote, "Your gift allows me to chase the dream my father never could. I won't waste it." I held that letter in my hands like it was a piece of Sarah's heart sent back to me. Ethan's world shrank. From a 6-bedroom house in Seattle, he moved into a holding cell with concrete walls. From a dream of inheriting millions, he faced a future of parole hearings and public defenders. He had chosen greed, and greed had left him with nothing. I did not celebrate his downfall. I did not gloat, but I let myself feel the contrast. My evenings were filled with peace. His were filled with regret. That was justice enough. The condo became home. I planted herbs on the balcony. I joined a local veterans woodworking group. Every Tuesday we gathered in a dusty workshop and carved toys for children at the hospital. I hadn't smelled cedar shavings in years. The sound of chisels, the scrape of sandpaper, the laughter of men who had all carried their own battles. It healed something in me. Sometimes I still thought of Ethan as a boy, holding a baseball bat too heavy for his arms, Sarah cheering from the stands. That boy was gone. The man who replaced him had chosen another path. I let that truth rest where it belonged, in the past. Looking back, I realized the hardest part of betrayal isn't losing the money. It isn't even facing the violence. It's accepting that the people you love can see your love as chains, that they can twist sacrifice into control, kindness into weakness. I had lived under that weight for too long. Now I was free. The lesson was simple but searing. Love cannot be bought, respect cannot be forced, and family cannot be defined by blood alone. Family is the people who choose to honor you. Family is the people who would never put you in the ground just to take what you built. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. As I walked through the park one evening, a group of children ran past, their shoes kicking up leaves. One of them tripped and fell. I reached down, lifted him by the arm, and brushed the dirt from his jeans. He smiled and said, "Thanks, mister," before darting off again. That small moment reminded me of Sarah's words all those years ago. We build so others can stand. I stopped at a bench, watched the sunset, and whispered, "I finally get it now." And in that moment I knew I had won, not against Ethan, but against despair. I no longer carried the weight of betrayal. I carried purpose. As I close this chapter of my life, I leave behind one truth I hope others hear. Family should never cost you your soul. Respect is worth more than inheritance, and dignity is the one legacy no one can steal. I don't need an apology. I don't need to look back. I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and I am enough. When I first stepped into my new condo overlooking the park, I realized how small 2 bedrooms can feel when you have spent most of your life in a 6-bedroom house filled with tools, photographs, and memories. But I also realized how big freedom feels when it finally returns to you. The walls were bare, the kitchen plain, but the air was mine. Every corner belonged to me, not to the shadow of arguments, not to the sound of accusations, and not to the weight of a son who believed my life was his ticket to millions. For the first time in decades, I closed a door and felt peace on the other side. The condo had cost me $200,000, paid in full from the proceeds of selling the old house. Some people thought I was downsizing, but I didn't see it that way. I saw it as right-sizing my life to fit the man I had become. I no longer needed rooms filled with silence or staircases that carried echoes of grief. What I needed was a window looking out at trees, the laughter of children in the park, and a table where I could set down my tea without remembering the ledger my son once called a chain. I kept only what mattered: Sarah's wedding photo on the mantel, the old wristwatch my father had given me when I turned 21, still ticking, still keeping time better than I ever did, and one chair, an oak chair with scratches from years of use, that reminded me that some things survive even when families do not. The rest I let go. And in letting go, I found something I had been searching for: space for peace. Each morning, I walked through the park. I nodded to the dog walkers, watched the children chase soccer balls, and sometimes stopped to breathe in the smell of fresh-cut grass. I had carried bitterness for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe without thinking of betrayal. It was in those walks that I began to understand the true lesson of what I had lived through. For us parents, the lesson is this: love is not about giving endless money, endless allowances, endless lifelines. Love is teaching responsibility, setting boundaries, and making sure our children know that respect cannot be bought with a check. I had failed at that once. I thought paying for college, $45,000 a year at the University of Washington, was proof of love. I thought buying Ethan a $20,000 car was the way to say, "I believe in you." What I learned too late was that love without boundaries is not love at all. It is a slow poison. And when the day comes that you are too weak to keep giving, the poison reveals itself. For children, the lesson is just as sharp. Entitlement destroys love. Gratitude builds legacy. My son saw my shops, my house, my savings as his birthright, not as the fruit of my labor. He believed inheritance was owed, not earned. That belief turned him into a stranger, one willing to leave me for dead in Alaska. Gratitude could have built a bridge between us, but entitlement burned it to ash. And what does this say about human nature in today's world? It says greed has grown louder than blood in many hearts. We live in a time when money can blind people to the very hands that fed them, the very roofs that sheltered them. But it also says something else. Character is the only wealth that lasts. You can lose a house, a business, even the loyalty of your own child. But no one can steal your dignity unless you hand it to them. I chose not to. That is why I am free. Ethan's fate was sealed in the courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming. The video Oliver captured, the ledger with his heel print pressed into mud, my testimony, the survival logs from Denali, all of it spoke louder than his excuses. The judge's gavel came down with finality. 20 years in prison for attempted murder, elder abuse, and conspiracy to defraud. I did not smile when I heard the sentence. I did not cry either. I simply breathed, knowing the world had spoken truth over lies. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Ethan. The handwriting was familiar, rushed, the same loops and slants I had once seen on grade school report cards. He wrote that he was sorry, that he had been lost, that he had wanted to be free from my control, and that he now realized he had destroyed himself in the process. He asked for forgiveness. I read it once, then I folded it and tore it clean down the middle. "I don't need his apology," I whispered into the quiet. "I have my peace." And I dropped the pieces into the trash. For years I thought hearing my son say he was sorry would heal me. But in that moment I understood the truth. Healing does not come from the lips of the one who hurt you. It comes from the heart of the one who chooses to let go. I did not answer him. I did not send money for his commissary account. I did not visit. I kept my distance, because boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. My self-respect mattered more than reopening wounds that needed to stay closed. Ethan would serve his sentence. That was his road to walk. Mine led somewhere else. In my new life, I found purpose again. I joined a veterans woodworking group where old soldiers carved toys for children in the hospital. The smell of cedar and sawdust filled the air, and for the first time since Sarah passed, I laughed while working with my hands. I also began volunteering with the scholarship committee, reading letters from students who dreamed of becoming engineers, nurses, and teachers. Each thank you note reminded me that the money Ethan tried to steal was now planting seeds in lives that would never forget the gift. One day, while cleaning out a drawer, I found a small envelope Sarah had left behind years earlier. Inside was a note in her handwriting. "Will, if you ever feel like giving up, remember this. Our life was built so others could stand taller. Keep building, even when I'm gone." I sat at the kitchen table, holding that note until the ink blurred from tears. I did not try to stop. It was not a heavy sadness. It was a gentle one. Like Sarah had reached across the years to remind me I was exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, I walked to the park and sat on a bench under a maple tree. Children ran past me, their laughter rising like music. A little girl dropped her ball, and it rolled to my feet. I picked it up, handed it back, and she said, "Thank you, mister," before running off again. I watched her go, and I thought, this is what legacy looks like. Not money, not inheritance. But small kindnesses passed forward. I whispered to myself, I finally found where I belong. Some families we're born into, others we build. Looking back now, the betrayal does not sting the way it once did. It has become a scar, a reminder, but no longer an open wound. My peace is not in forgetting, but in choosing to live with dignity. So what are the lessons I leave behind for anyone listening? For parents, love your children, but do not confuse love with surrender. Give them tools, not chains of money. Teach them gratitude, responsibility, and resilience. That is the only inheritance that never decays. For children, respect the sacrifices made for you. Do not see them as debts you can exploit, but as gifts you can honor. Gratitude is not weakness, it is a strength that binds families together long after the bank accounts are closed. And for the world we live in today, greed will always tempt, entitlement will always whisper, but character, true character, is the only wealth that endures. Houses crumble, accounts drain, but dignity outlives us all. Now I rise each morning not as a man burdened by betrayal, but as a man free to live. My condo is modest, my days are simple, but my spirit is unchained. I sip my coffee by the window, I carve toys with friends, I answer letters from students who dream bigger than their wallets allow. And each night, as the park quiets and the last light slips behind the trees, I know without doubt, I chose right. The chapter of betrayal is closed. The chapter of peace is mine to write. And so, when people ask me if I will ever forgive Ethan, I tell them the truth. I don't need to. Forgiveness is not about setting him free. It is about setting myself free. And I already am. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.